You're listening to Mic Drop Moments, a podcast brought to you each week with me, your host, Sandra Garlick. During the podcast, I invite guests to share their amazing stories, knowledge, and top tips, including their mic drop moments, especially for you. I also share my learning and inspiration about life, business growth, and visibility. I'm delighted to bring the Mic Drop Moments podcast to you each week to inspire and motivate you to achieve. Enjoy the podcast and don't forget to leave a review. Mic Drop Moments is sponsored by Grow Radio. Want to launch your own podcast? Grow Radio are here to help. Grow Radio has launched and supported countless podcasts, and they'd love to do the same for you. Just hit record and they'll handle the rest. No editing stress, no technical faff, just a great podcast released when you want. Need a little extra support? Grow Radio's workshops and courses make getting started easy. Let's bring your podcast to life. Message Grow Radio on social media. Let's make this happen. Welcome to Mic Drop Moments with a brand new episode, a brand new month and a brand new topic. And it's all about building momentum and turning your visibility into business growth. And this is a topic that I think is really needed right now, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Momentum in business isn't about the loud stuff. It isn't about the things that people see. It's about what goes on behind the scenes. So I'm going to be chatting a little bit about that. I'm going to be sharing some of my personal experiences with you and also a few other things as well along the way. So let's get started. So momentum in business. It's not one big thing. It doesn't just suddenly happen. It's not one thing that suddenly clicks. It's a lot quieter than that. And it's something that's built in the small things that you do every day, every week, every month, every quarter. And it's all about the conversations that you have, the rooms that you walk into, and the moments where you decide to just simply show up and just be you, even when you're not sure that it's actually doing anything. And I think this is where a lot of people actually get frustrated and stop what they're doing in the tracks and try something new and, oh, let's have a go at this instead. It's not working. Because momentum takes time. It's like that great big snowball, or, it sort of gathers and gathers and gathers and gets bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on, as it rolls down the hill. So I think you need to think about momentum in business a little bit like that. Because quite often you think, I'm doing all the things, I'm doing what everybody's told me, I'm doing what I think is right, but you're not seeing the results right now. And I say this to some of my members, especially in the Amplify experience, the work we do together over 6 months might not have immediate impact, but the small things you're doing now is setting the basis for what happens in the next 6 months and the 6 months after that. I make no secret that I work in 90-day cycles. And the reason I do that, I'm just starting at the time of recording in a brand new 90-day cycle, at the brand new beginning of a new financial year. I don't just dive straight in on the 1st of April and say, right, I'm doing this, and it all changes. What I do is that reflection piece where I look back at the previous 90 days, the previous year, what worked, what went well, what was brilliant, what wasn't quite so good, what needs tweaking, what do I want to ditch? And that's about how you gather that information to start building momentum and build on that momentum from the previous year. So it just isn't a point in time where you say, right, scrap that, let's do something completely new. I'm actually working on a method to build on what I've already achieved in the last 12 months. And then I build on that slowly over time, because Fast doesn't always win the race. What do they say? It's a marathon here, not a sprint. And I think that's really important in business. So today I want to talk a lot about that. And it's about what's happening in those moments and how you turn that into real growth in your business. It's the bit that no one sees. It's the bit behind the scenes. It's those days or late nights, whichever way you work. Mine tend to be early mornings, but it's those points in time where you're doing the graft behind the scenes, the bit that nobody actually sees. We all go out there looking like beautiful swans, or some of the time anyway, and our little feet are going like crazy underneath. But that has to happen behind the scenes as well. You don't probably see that there's many days in between meetings, in between Zoom sessions, in between going to events, that I'm sat actually literally planning and working on stuff. And I build that time into my diary. So we've just started the new financial year in business. I have in my business anyway. And right now it's a little quieter. At the time of recording, it's the Easter holidays. Things have slowed down slightly. But what's happening behind the scenes? Well, actually, probably more than any other time. And yes, I do take time off over the bank holiday. But actually, there's a lot going on, and this is where I do all that planning behind the scenes. And as I said, I'm looking back over the last year, and I probably spend almost a week doing this at the end of my financial year. So I work on the figures first, but it's not all about the figures. I look at what I've actually done during that year, and I think, what has really worked well? What do I want to do more of? What didn't go quite so well? Does it need tweaking, refining, or does it just need putting to one side and saying, actually, that's going in the bin? It didn't quite pan out how I expected. And that's when I go back to my financials and think, right, how much did it cost me, not just in time, but also in financials to deliver X, Y, or Z? What was my return on investment? So towards the latter part of last year, I spent a lot of time going to events, burn myself out in doing so, if you've listened to the previous episodes where I shared that. But I was exhibiting, speaking, sponsoring, exhibiting, speaking, sponsoring all the way through the last quarter of 2025. Now is the time that I look at that expenditure, I look at that investment, because I see it as an investment. I wasn't expecting things to happen on the day, but what it has given me in the terms of ROI and return on investment. And that's what I start looking at. So I look at what I don't want to repeat, and I make my decisions for the next financial year based on that learning. Now, there's some things that work really well, and yes, I'll do more of that. But there's some things that didn't go quite so well. I think, right, I've tried it. It didn't quite work. I won't do that again. And that's the learning. That's the learning we take that we can help to build momentum in the future. So, and none of that stuff that's going on behind the scenes, the work I'm doing right now, none of that is visible, well, except the people in my membership, because I do share what I'm doing with them. But no one sees that. No one comments on it. I don't share it publicly because I don't need to. It's not the exciting bit of business. It's not the sexy bit, the bit that makes you go, whoa, that's great. Sitting with spreadsheets and software, financial software, and looking at bank statements, looking at nominals, looking at my expenditure for the previous year. What have I invested on? Has it come to fruition? Have my plans that I sat down at this point last year, have they come to fruition? Well, actually, I'd like to share I've exceeded what I planned last year, and I'm really excited about that. But that doesn't mean to say I stop now and say, right, I've done it, I can just do that again. It's not the same as that. It's actually planning, right, okay, what am I going to do this year that's going to take me where I want to go? And this is where things start. This is where the momentum builds, because I know the work that I'm doing this week at the time of recording, as I say, is what shapes the whole of my next year, right up until the 31st of March, 2027. And I will keep coming back to it. It's not a snapshot in time. You'll have heard me speak in the past about my very first business plan. It had all the financials in there. It had the marketing and strategy in there. It had the growth plans in there. What did I do with it? Printed it off and put it in a drawer, and found it 2 years later when I was tidying out my desk drawer. It's not that this is a working live document that sits on my desktop and I look at every day. And I was doing a one-to-one with one of my clients today, just before recording this. And I was talking about 3 documents that I have on my desktop, apart from my strategy and everything else. But I have a cash flow forecast. I know what's money I've got any single day. I also have a forecast. I know exactly what I'm aiming to sell and how I'm going to generate revenue over the next 12 months. And I also have a P&L document that I use when I'm delivering events, because that's vital. If your event doesn't cover its own costs, then why are you doing it? It might be a lead magnet. Obviously, some events are, but I have those 3 documents on my desktop. They are not in a drawer. They're not gathering dust in a notebook. They are living, live documents that I work on all the time. And that's how I build my momentum. And it may be the same for you. It may be that you're tweaking things along the way, and we do. And that's why I work on my 90-day strategies, is because I review midway through 90 days and at the end of my 90 days to make sure I'm on track. And it is the small moments. It's it's not one big thing. And it could be the conversation you have at an event. You might walk away and you might think nothing of it. But then somebody reaches out and they say, remember that conversation we had last month at that event? Can we have a chat? That's when momentum starts to build. It could be that social media post that you nearly didn't put out, but you did. And then 3 weeks later, if you're on LinkedIn, because that seems to be the time lag now, 3 weeks later, somebody DMs you through LinkedIn, that post really resonated with you. Or it could be a newsletter that you've sent and somebody's flagged, and weeks later, even months later, in some instances, in my case, and they just reply to it and say, this landed, can we have a conversation? And so when you're doing these things and you're putting things out there, and you might think at the time, well, that didn't land, I didn't get many likes on that. It's not about vanity metrics at all. What you don't realize is people are reading, they're watching, they're lurking. I call them my favorite people in the whole world, my lurkers. And I'm not performing for my lurkers, but I'm making them heard. I'm making sure that everything I put out there is to them, as well as the people who are more active on my socials. Every room I walk into, I try to have as many conversations as possible. And every message I send with intention. I don't spam in people's inboxes. Let me just briefly interrupt this podcast for a moment. There have been times in my business when I was everywhere, speaking, hosting, exhibiting, sponsoring, posting on socials. Visible? Absolutely. Connected? Not always. Because visibility without connection doesn't grow your audience. I want to invite you to a secret podcast, How to Grow Your Audience and Connect. It's where I share what actually works, how to build your audience, and how to build an audience that trusts you, engages with you, and buys from you. Not more noise, not about the vanity metrics, real connection, real growth. If that's for you, the link is in the show notes. I'd love to see you there. So as I say, over time, these things start to stack up, they start to build, and then something shifts. So do you remember those events I went to in October, November, December? And I was exhibiting, I was speaking, I was sponsoring. Well, months and months later, almost 6 months in one case, something's happened. I've got an invitation maybe to speak, an invitation maybe to do something, an invitation to write, and it just lands just at the perfect moment. And that's when you see the return on investment. And you think, where did that come from? And actually you look back and you realize it was that event, it was that conversation, it was that connection, and it's led to this. And it comes from all those small moments, probably the ones that you didn't think mattered at the time, and suddenly they come to fruition. And I want to be clear on this next part. It's not about doing more. And I say to all my lovely Amplify members when they join me at the start of their 6 months, this isn't about doing more. This is about doing more of what you love and being intentional with where you spend your time. You don't need to be cramming more into your week. You don't need to be trying to find space, because if you read my email last week, my Friday mic drop, when I shared about how I found 74 hours in my year. 74 hours. That's a lot of time. In fact, it wasn't 74 hours. It was something like, I'm telling you, a massive porky there. It was 74 days. 74 days. And do you know how I found those 74 days? I worked out from my phone that I've been spending 2 hours a day doom scrolling. 2 hours a day. That's Monday to Friday, because weekends don't count. Monday to Friday, that's 5 days. That's 10 hours a week. And over the year, I worked out that I'd wasted the equivalent of 74 7-hour days. Imagine what you could do with 74 days. If you want that newsletter, just reach out and I'll send it to you if you haven't seen it. But it really was a wake-up call for me. And that was building momentum in the wrong direction. How much of that time was lost? What could I do with 2 hours a day? Well, actually, I'm using it to do something more productive. I'm using it to do some writing and things like that. So it's not about doing more. It's about protecting your time. I'm very protective of my time right now. I love my weekends. I love spending time with my sons, with my grandkids. I go to the football. I'm going to the rugby this weekend. I'm doing the football and the rugby this weekend. And I've made a conscious decision to reclaim Fridays for myself. This week, I'm going to visit, my gym. I'm going for a coffee with somebody, one of my clients. And we're not going to talk about work. We're just going to talk about stuff. Because Fridays, I call them free flow Fridays for a reason. It means I can do anything I want on a Friday. It's taken me time to get here. I've had to do it in small stages to get that into that place. But it also means I have to be intentional about what I'm doing. So I don't have the space to do things just for the sake of it. So everything I do goes in my diary. My diary sits on my iPhone because it connects to my Mac, because it connects to everything. And do you know what? The thing I love about it is everything I put in there, I ask myself a question. Why am I doing this? And I've held off from booking onto a lot of events this year because was it just a nice to do, or was there intention behind it? Don't get me wrong, I'm going to some amazing events this year, and I've even got an event in my diary for February 2027, and I've purchased a ticket because I know it's intentional and it aligns with my plans for the next 12 months. So I show up where it matters. And when I'm in a room, I'm really in it. I'm not just on the outside watching, I'm in it. And I'm in it for a reason. And I think that's where the difference is. So many people go to events, just go for the good time and whatever. Maybe write a few notes, put them on the shelf when you go back and do nothing with it. I go to learn, to implement, and to network. And they're my main objectives for every event that I go to. And people need to see you more than once. It's no point going to an event, and this used to happen years ago, and I've still seen it quite recently, is you turn up to a networking event and you go and you make some connections and nothing happens from it. But you go back the next time and the next time, and that's when the connections start to happen, the relationships start to build. And some people, as I say, many years ago and more recently, I've seen it a couple of times. They walk into a room, make no deep connections, go away and say, well, I didn't get any leads from that, I'm not going anymore. And it's such a big mistake. People need to see you more than once. They need to hear your name a few times before it starts to click, especially if you're me, because I forget names the moment I'm told them, but I remember the people and I remember their stories. And that's why I bang on so much about the stories you share when you're connecting. And they need to come across you in different places as well. So I remember walking into a room recently and somebody said, "Oh, you're Sandra Garlick. I saw you at," and they listed off the event. They said, "I've been reading your posts on LinkedIn," and then they told me somewhere else they'd seen me. Now, we'd never met in person, but they were able to reel off all three places where they'd seen me, very different places. And it was really interesting that they felt um, basically they needed to come over and really just tell me that. And yeah, and we've been communicating since, which is really great. So once they've seen you more than once and they've heard your name a few times and they come across you in different places, it starts to click. And have you ever walked in a room and people say, "Oh, I'm sure I know you," or "Oh, your name's everywhere right now"? That's visibility in action, but that's the bit that leads to the connection, and that's when the momentum starts to build. And it didn't happen overnight, believe you me. I've been working on my personal brand, on everything for almost 20 years, maybe even 25 years. I don't say that lightly because I actually started working on my personal brand way before I started my first business. But actually, when I started my first business, that's when I started to really ramp it up. And that was 20 years ago. So yeah, it's just me showing up again and again in different places and making sure that I have an action plan and objectives before I turn up anywhere. And I was booked for a paid speaking opportunity a few years back. I'll just share this story with you. And it was really interesting. I stood on a stage and delivered something, and it was in my previous business actually, and never thought anything of it, had a few conversations. And then somebody reached out to me and said, "We'd like to book you to speak." And they gave me a whole list of dates and list of venues, paid speaking opportunity. And I said, "Oh, as I always do, how did you find out about me? Because I didn't know them." And they said, "Oh, one of our members saw you speak on stage 2 years ago." 2 years ago. That's how long it took for someone to need me and to suggest me and refer to my name. They'd obviously been watching me on LinkedIn and do other things, but it took 2 years for them to reach out. Now, as I say, at the time I did that talk, we may have had a conversation. They didn't follow up. Nothing. I could have walked away and thought, well, that's a waste of time. I'm not speaking there again. These things have a habit. I once had a client come from a conversation we'd had 4 years earlier. Momentum builds over time. So I just wanted to share that because I think it really demonstrates too often we forget about this. And if something doesn't happen straight away, we just say, right, that didn't work. I'm going to go on and do something else. And it doesn't mean it didn't land. Sometimes you just have to leave an impression. Every time you show up, leave an impression. Make it a good one. Make it a lasting impression. Make it an impression that somebody actually thinks, wow, one day I'd like to work with you. And that's what one of my clients said recently. I always knew one day that I'd work with you. And how lovely was that? And make it easy for people to talk about you. They can't talk about you if they don't understand what you do. You've got to make it easy for them. So think about what you do and who you help and what you want to be known for. Because when people get that, they remember you, they mention you, and they recommend you. And that's when things really start to move. So make it easier. If you, when you meet somebody, have this verbal diatribe that comes out of your mouth and they sort of you get to the end of it and they think, oh my God, what was that? Then they're not going to get it. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Um, and yeah, it just doesn't need to be complicated in any way. You don't need a big plan. You just need rhythm and you just need a few great conversations each week, showing up in a couple of places each month and making sure you're in the right rooms. And that's it. It's not complicated, as I say. And when you keep showing up in different places, whether that's online or offline, things will start to build. And this is how momentum works. It's not being loud, it's not being everywhere. You don't physically have to be in every single room, and it's not always obvious. You never know. One thing you may say during an ad hoc flyaway conversation may just land with somebody and leave that lasting impression, and your momentum builds in the background quietly. And then one day, things start to come back to you and you realize actually what I was working on back then was working. and I didn't need to deviate. I didn't need to take the detour. I didn't need to go off track. And if you take one thing from today, I suppose, my mic drop moment, it's remember the small things you're doing today, the small things you're doing right now, no matter how insignificant you think they are, they could be the things that actually matter more than you even think right now. They could be the things that actually make someone click and come back to you in the future and say, I remember when I saw you at, and they will tell you. So if you're at the point where you're thinking, oh gosh, I need to be showing up more, but I don't really know or have a strategy for doing this. Am I showing up in the right places? And that's the work we do inside the Amplify experience. Basically, I work to your agenda, not mine. It's not a course, it's not a program. And not only do I help you with your visibility, but also speaking on stages, finding those opportunities, and just really helping you to work a way that works for you on your terms, to actually make those lasting impressions, to be remembered, to be seen in the right rooms, and of course, to be invited onto those stages, even if it's 2 years into the future. It's not about doing more. It's about being exactly you. It's about amplifying your voice, amplifying you, amplifying your business, clarifying your message, and helping you show up in a way that actually works for you and your business and your life as well. And you're not just visible, you're actually remembered. So do reach out if that sounds like something you'd be interested in going forward, and book a discovery call. That's it from me this week. I'll be back next week with another episode of Mic Drop Moments. Thank you for listening to the Mic Drop Moments podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Join me next week for more inspiration, learning, and top tips. Want to work with me on your business growth and strategy, speaking, or simply growing your audience? Just get in touch. Visit womanwho.co.uk to find out how you can start your speaking and visibility journey, or even feature on a future podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's podcast. And if there are any topics you would like to hear, just get in touch with me, your host, Sandra Garlick.